Well, we're going to Flicky's Island, so now for the 3D Blast adaptation. It's funny how Sega must have thought of it as a mainline game in the series since it forced both Sonic comics to adapt it. Alright then, so we start out with Tails explaining that the Flicky doesn't exactly talk to him, he just gets a feeling of what it's saying, and it's hard to explain. So he's kind of slightly telepathic, but isn't entirely in touch with what he's being told yet. Maybe he gets images in his brain of what he's saying, but not even that. So he just gets the feeling of that images. Huh, Sonic even says, some kind of telepathy, huh? I thought I was reaching, but they actually say that. They see an ancient building that was abandoned for centuries, and after Sonic shows genre blindness, thinking they're wasting time here, Eggman calls to their attention immediately with a bunch of creepy badniks. You know, Eggman, if you just let them leave, you could have built up a way bigger army and sent it after them. Eggman, after Tails suggests letting Sonic see what they're up against being cautious, shows them a warp ring and pulls a Flicky out of it by pulling a green thing. Eggman explains that he's always wondered where the Flickies go to, since they're only seen on the island for a few weeks every year. So is this just a vacation spot for them? Sonic actually bothers to ask why he's capturing Flickies, when it should be obvious to him that he's just using them to power badniks. This is... When Archie did this, when we got to this point where Sonic and Eggman were in front of a warp ring, we already got to see a whole island that had gems for the flora, and the birds were eating the magical gems. And it was explained to us that the Flickies were an easy target for Robotnik because they didn't have any natural predators, so they trusted him easily, so they didn't run away from him. We got all that explained, and it was interesting. And we got the interesting concept of Rotor and Tails shooting water at the badniks, and that actually de-roboticized them. I mean, we've got none of that here so far. It's literally just Sonic and Tails immediately go to Eggman, which feels very lazy. And we're at the last paragraph here. He puts one in a badnik and sends an army of them after Sonic and Tails never got to tell Sonic I told you so. Tails acts like Sonic's spin dash not working against a robot has never happened before, which is flat out wrong. For some reason, Sonic seems to openly blame himself for it, saying he's out of practice, rather than saying it's a tough badnik for his pride's sake. He hits a badnik harder than he ever has before, and it frees the yellow Flicky. The story ends with Tails being grabbed as a hostage by two badniks because Sonic was distracted, and Tails apologizes to Sonic for it. Yeah, this is definitely worse than the Sonic 3D Blast adaptation for Archie. In the next story, Zorbel the Pirate Queen says that her treasure map is a map to find someone who can tell them where the treasure is. And they're gonna trust that person, to be honest with them. You'd think if that person knew where the treasure was, he would have had it and spent it by now. She says she's looking for Krakatoa the Sea Serpent, which I misread as Krakatoa at first. It turns out that a sea serpent who spends all his time in the ocean apart from the land knows all the secrets of Mobius. Wouldn't that include knowing where Emerald Hill Zone folk were hidden and who Bob Beaky is? Good thing Robotnik never found this guy. Plunder says that the same serpent destroyed 100 warships, devouring entire crews in the process. Zorbel says that they'll head for Skull Rock. And after the pirate girls wonder if Plunder took them to the wrong place out of fear, they see the surprisingly small and wimpy looking sea serpent, who limits himself to 3 questions to avoid overwhelming himself with them, I guess. And then Plunder promptly wastes 2 of the questions with rhetorical questions. The Pirate Queen ruins it by using up her last question on asking him if he knows where the treasure is. I really hate that serpent. And if these were real pirates, they'd just strangle it already and make it tell them the answer. After Simpson the cat puts the serpent in a cooking cauldron and it's holding a cookbook for fish dishes being useful, the serpent agrees to bend the rules for the questions just once. In the next story, we see Amy and Techno hanging out together again on a day off, hiking across Rocky Valley to unwind. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, they find a crashed UFO and some very stereotypical looking green aliens try to shoot at them with ray guns at first sight. Great diplomacy skills there. Amy wishes she could check out their cave without being seen, and Techno tells her to try a drill machine which she had wanted to use to find underground rock samples for some reason. She's not a geologist. Also, Techno's hair is always covering one of her eyes. I guess it's more see-through than it looks, or she's already blind in that eye anyways. Because otherwise, no one would put up with that. Never got that about design. She digs a tunnel into the cave with the drilling machine that really should have been loud enough to alert the aliens. And after Amy complains about being dirty from all that dust, she says that she's found a plan on how to make a UFO life-size model from paper mache. Then they see some gold jewelry that it turns out the aliens threatening them are wearing. As I figured out from a few panels ago, they're just wearing alien suits, which is more Sonic-like. Amy says that she left her crossbow back at the base. Why would she do that? And to relieve stress, I suppose, she and Techno make snarky remarks about the camping at fancy dress party when they're being threatened with being shot to death. I guess this was their plan to stall for time by making the villains tell them about their master plan. The villains are selling the gold bit by bit so that no one would get suspicious. You'd think people would be suspicious the minute one of them showed up with gold and started selling it periodically. And they dressed up as aliens to scare people away from the cave. All of this would be fine and unvillainous if they weren't threatening people with death. Then Amy tries to convince them that the gold is a fake prop left over from a film made here called Caves of Gold. The villains fight and cause a cave-in that buries the golden rocks. Unfortunately, everyone escapes from being buried in them just in time. And of course, it's revealed that Amy was lying, and she asks Techno to dig up the treasure, which should probably have the Freedom Fighters set for food money for years to come. So I hope they at least reference that, because that'll totally justify them not having jobs to support themselves. The story ends with Techno calling Amy a treasure for her clever plan, which is very sweet. I'm really glad the story didn't drag itself out and got wrapped up in one story instead. I really thought that it would be a story arc. But yeah, the fact that Amy's going to do the literal exact same thing that the villains were going to do, only without the threatening people part, proves that the villains really weren't villains until they started threatening people. There's no reason they couldn't have just said, please keep it a secret, or I guess they really didn't want to share their gold with them. But you'd think that they would be heroes that might respect the fact that it's their gold. I don't know. The first two stories are by Nigel Kitching, and the first one involves Tails being kidnapped by badniks while Sonic was fighting some especially tough badniks with flickies in them. In the script, that's literally all I have to say about it. Compare this to my 3D Blast adaptation review for Archie, and I had so much more to say. And of course, this is just the first story in a story arc, but this is a game adaptation. You'd think that it would be the whole issue, so that we could have the entire story arc done in one issue. You know, like I would expect of a game adaptation. It feels very lazy and empty so far compared to Archie's, where like they didn't have to have the flickies eating gems and like flower gems and stuff like that. They didn't have to have interesting, charming concepts like Robotnik's cape moving and tying itself around Sonic so that he wouldn't be able to escape it, or Robotnik's nose electrocuting Sonic. Like, Mike Gallagher put so much more effort into 3D Blast adaptation, and this is just... he happens to be on Flicky's Island, and he happens to be using Flickies. Whatever. The second story has all of the questions to the all-knowing sea serpent god being used up by the pirates, and then they threaten it into giving them another question about the treasure. Which, I guess that it makes for a more interesting story to see those questions being used up, but pirates should have just threatened him immediately. And it really is a good thing that Grimer hasn't found this guy and learned who Bob Beakey is in a logical, natural way. In the final story by Lou Stringer, made me worry at first about out-of-place stereotypical aliens, but it turns out they were just people in costumes that were selling gold. And Amy tricked the people threatening her into thinking it was fake so she can drill to it herself. It's nice to see Amy being clever and Amy and Techno be so close hanging out together.